Welcome to this tutorial. This is a supplement to the Tinder AI Code With Me tutorial that I've published earlier on this channel. That's a tutorial where I walk you through building an entire Tinder clone, which not just behaves like Tinder in terms of the basic functionalities, but it also leverages AI so that you can talk to AI-generated profiles and have proper conversations with them just like you would talk to a human being. Now, in that tutorial, we have the functionality to browse through a bunch of profiles, look at their profile photograph, and then choose a match and then interact with them. For that to happen, we have to have a bunch of profiles there to interact with, to begin with, right? We have to generate those profiles, and all those profiles have been generated using AI. So in that tutorial, I told you how to get a pre-made set of profiles that you can just download into the project and then use them and interact with them. But those profiles are generated by UI and they were generated by code. So in this tutorial, in this video, I'm going to walk you through the process of how I generated those profiles using AI and using Spring, right? I use Java and Spring Boot to generate those profiles using GPT and using an open source image generation technology called Stable Diffusion. I'll walk you through the whole process, starting with how we generate these profile data, how we can make it diverse, and then I walk you through the process of installing a software called Automatic 1111 and Stable Diffusion, which is a way in which you can generate these images on your machine. I talk you through the process of setting that up, getting a model, and then using that model to generate images, and then also writing code so that it can generate corresponding images for each of the profiles that we have generated. So basically recorded the process of me coding this whole thing so that you can code along and follow along, and this is a good experience of how you can leverage your Java knowledge to make calls to OpenAI, to make calls to other image generation AI technologies and achieve something like this without having to write a single line of Python code, right? We're going to do all of this in Spring Boot. So we're going to start out where we left off in the middle of that video, where we have generated the APIs for this Tinder AI application, and then we need a bunch of profiles to seed into the database so that we can build subsequent APIs, right? So at that point in the video, I said, okay, just download these profile files and then you're good to go. Well, how did those profile files come? This is the part of the video where I've actually generated those files, okay? So you don't have to be following along that tutorial to watch this, right? A common question that I might anticipate for this is like, okay, I didn't watch that video, can I just start with this? Well, you can, but you have to get the source code where I left off in that video, okay? So I am adding the profile generation piece to the Tinder AI project. And this is a separate video because I would imagine not everybody watching that video would be interested in this. So there is some fundamental assumption that you're familiar with what was happening in that project so that you can take over this one. But if you're not familiar with that, well, I would just recommend just peeking and at least understanding what's going on there before you get into this video and coding along this one. So in the agenda of this video is we are going to use Java and Spring Boot to generate random Tinder profiles. Random profiles of men and women, which simulates the kind of profiles that you have on Tinder. And we are going to write code to make it diverse. We're going to write code to have a diverse set of ages, diverse set of ethnicities, and diverse set of interests and personality types. We're going to model the Myers-Briggs personality type, and we're going to have a random set of personality types. And then secondly, we're going to use open source image generation models to generate profile images for each of those profiles. I think I generate about 100 to 200 profiles for men and women as a result of this, but the code is there. So once you follow along and you have that working, you can generate unlimited profiles, all right? So let's get started. We'll jump right into the action where I have generated the APIs for the conversation and all that stuff. And now it's time to actually seed the system with actual profiles. And that's where I'm going to make a switch to creating profiles using OpenAI. Okay, now it's time for the fun AI stuff. We need to create AI profiles. All right, let's do this. I'm going to have this creation thing run when the run method is called, but I'm not going to put all that code over here. I'm going to create a separate service and I'm going to just delegate it over there, right? So I'm going to, in profiles package, I'm going to create a new Java class, and I'm going to call this profile creation service. And this is going to be a Spring service so that I can dependency inject it. And here I'm going to go and auto-wire. This is private profile creation service, And at the beginning, when I need to run this, I'm going to say profile creation service dot. I'm going to say create profiles. And let's say I take in the number of profiles that I want to create, right? And I'm going to add this method here, public void create profiles, which takes in the number of profiles that you want to create. Okay, I need to know what is the number of profiles that I need to create, and I'm going to basically just create a simple hard-coded personality trait and a simple hard-coded age and ethnicity and gender to begin with. And then as we evolve this code, we're going to make it a little more dynamic. Now, this is going to be the method which does a bunch of stuff, right? I'm going to just comment out all the things that I need to do, and then we're going to write code which does all of those things, right? The first thing I would do is identify the age range, genders, and ethnicities for generating profiles, right? So ethnicities. I need to know, okay, well, the genders are going to be male, female, and non-binary. We can pull up what are the top ethnicities. We'll pull up the genders, we'll pull up the age range, and we're going to set that as kind of like the seed for profile generation, right? This is going to be the inputs to the profile generation. Once we've identified this, now for each combination of these variables, what we're going to do is we're going to make a call to OpenAI to generate a sample Tinder profile for these variables, right? So we're going to get a unique Tinder profile for each combination of these variables and parameters, right? Once we have the Tinder profile for this, we are going to save the values in a JSON file. Why do I want to save it in the JSON file? I want to save it in the JSON file because I want to be able to see those values when the application starts up without having to make a call to OpenAI every time, right? Now I can insert it to the MongoDB database, but if I clear the database, all the data goes away, right? Now I want to generate this so that in case you don't want to do this, right? In case you don't want to create profiles, well, I'm going to check in the JSON file with a bunch of profiles already created so you can just use that instead of making a call, right? It's more permanent than just saving it to the database. I want the output of all these profile generation to also be checked into the repository. And the way to do this is by creating a JSON file that I can also check in to the repository. Now, after the JSON file has been saved, after I've done this for all combination of variables and I'm happy with how many profiles that I've created, what do? I open the JSON file and read the contents into a list of profile, or perhaps a set of profile, okay? I'm going to read all the contents that were created. If we don't want to run these generations, you just want to use the JSON file, well, then you don't have to do these things, right? In fact, you don't have to do these things. You just open the JSON file, and then what do? You save those values to MongoDB, all right? This is going to be the logic for creating the profiles, right? We are going to get all combinations of all the variables, parameters for profiles. We're going to make, for each combination, we're going to make a call to OpenAI and say, hey, make a Tinder profile with this particular age, gender, ethnicity, and all that stuff. And then every Tinder profile that gets created, we save it to a JSON file. And then once we are done generating all those profiles, we open the JSON file, get the contents, and save each of those into the profile document in MongoDB, which is basically this thing, right? We're going to create one for each of the generated values, and then we are going to do profile repository.save, right? Just like we've done over here, right? Just like this. Okay, so that's going to be the logic for our profile creation service. Now, how do we go about this? The first thing I'm going to do is get the OpenAI chat client over here, because we need this. We need this. We don't need this here. We are not going to be making a call over here. I'm going to go here and inject the OpenAI chat client over here. I'm going to make this a constructor that injects. Okay, I have a chat client. Now, I'm going to create a method over here. I'm going to call this, let me make it private. Make AI call, which takes in a string prompt, and then it returns a string response. Okay, well, actually, let me not do this. Maybe we will think about that later. Now, what do I need to do? I need to identify the range of ages, genders, and ethnicities. All right, let's start with the ages. I'm going to have list of integers, ages equals list.off. I'm going to create a range. I'm just going to create a bunch of random ages, and we can tweak this as we go. We can make this a little more comprehensive, but I'm going to start with a small set. So let's spread out the ages. I'm going to have, let's say, 20, and then 25, 30, 35, 40. Okay, these are the available ages that it is going to generate profiles for. And maybe we can shuffle this and then pick the n number of profiles from here. I don't know. It's going to multiply. So we'll have to shuffle this list and pick random values from here. As long as the number of profiles aren't met, we're just going to pick random values from these lists. All right, so these are the available ages. What about the available genders? We already have the available genders. We have list of gender equals list.off. Going to have gender.male, gender.female, and then gender.non-binary. And finally, list of ethnicities. List.off. What are the most popular ethnicities? Let's take a look. All right, I'm currently in the US and I'm looking at the top ethnic groups in the United States Wikipedia article. I'm going to just pick these top ones, and I'm going to ignore unlisted. This should do for us for now. And I'm just going to copy and create one ethnicity for each one of these. All right, so white, Black, Asian, Native American, and then Hispanic. All right. These are the available ethnicities, and we are going to, again, shuffle these and create some profiles from there. Now, we have three parameters, three different variables that is going to influence what is the profile that gets created. So for example, I can say create a 30-year-old female who is Asian, and we are going to create a prompt to OpenAI and say create a Tinder profile for this particular age, gender, and ethnicity. Okay. Now, I'm going to shuffle these because we want to pick in order. I'm going to say ages, so that collections dot shuffle of ages. All right, we have immutable going to mutable, so I'm going to have to wrap this in a new array list. We need a new array list for this. I'm going to remove this. Just an array list is enough. And the reason I need to do this is because list.off gives me an immutable list, and I need to shuffle, which basically means that I need to be able to mutate them. All right, these are not used. Well, we will use it now. Collections.shuffle of genders and collections.shuffle of ethnicities. All right, now we have 3 random values. Now what I can do is basically create a loop, one within another, until we hit the number of profiles, or I can just pick one after another. This is testing. I'm not generating a lot of profiles in bulk now. I just want to generate 1 or 2 and make sure that this works. So this is fine. Now I have this done. Okay, this is done. Next, now for each combination of values, I need to make a call to OpenAI and have it generate a Tinder profile for these variables, right? So I'm going to create a prompt now. Say string prompt equals. All right, so my prompt is going to be create a Tinder profile persona of A, and let's say ages dot get of 0. All right, let me actually move this out here so that the prompt is a little bit better, right? I'm going to say int age equals ages dot get of 0, int gender equals genders dot get of 0, string ethnicity equals ethnicities dot get of 0. Now I can say create a Tinder profile persona for a age year old ethnicity gender dot to string. Okay, so this is going to be something like create a Tinder profile persona for a 25-year-old black male. Okay, we are going to generate this prompt by using these random values. And then what is this complaining about? All right, you can use get first. Thanks, IntelliJ. You can use this instead of a 0, which is basically the same thing. All right, now I'm going to create this prompt, and then I'm going to continue adding plus, including the first name, last name, Myers-Briggs personality type, and a Tinder bio. Okay, I'm basically not giving any formatted output. I'm basically saying, hey, just generate this, right? Here are the variables, just generate this. Okay, now I'm going to call OpenAI and say chat client dot call of new prompt of prompt. Isn't that what we used? Let's find out. Yeah, new prompt of the prompt. You're going to get the prompt, and then do chat client dot call of the prompt, and you're going to get a response. And then we're going to pluck the response from this thing, result.output.content. Okay. We are going to say, save this to a local variable, response, and then we're going to system out println of the response. Okay, I'm just going to do 1 now, right? We are not doing number of profiles. We're just doing 1. We're just printing 1 profile based on just this random thing that gets picked. Okay, let's run this and see if this works fine. Here I'm going to say create profile. We'll remove all this stuff. Okay, and let's see, it's going to call the profile creation service with whatever number of profiles, which we're basically ignoring right now. And we're going to create a random profile and just print the text to the console. Not even saving to JSON file yet, right? We're just getting the text. Okay, let's run and see if this works. Going to go here and restart. Okay, it should make a call to the OpenAI API. And here you go. So it's picked, I think it's picked, let's see, Jason Miller, Myers-Briggs personality type. I should print out the values that were picked as well. All right, so let's do that. I'm going to go over here, and then I'm going to say print the prompt. Okay, and then run this again. I'll know what got picked and what is the output. Okay, so here is the Tinder profile for 30-year-old black male, including the first name, last name. Okay, so this is the name that it came up with. Here is the Myers-Briggs personality type. Here is the Tinder bio. You notice how it has basically created markup text, right? It says name and then Myers-Briggs personality, because I haven't given it any instructions for how to structure this, right? How to structure the output. So it's basically tried to render in a markdown format. Okay, it's this. It's even given it a title. It's pretty cool. Okay, Marcus, professional, driven, compassionate guy, loves to make meaningful connections. Look at that. It's given an awesome bio. It's given an awesome bio. All right. It's pretty cool. Okay. Now, this is great and all, but here is a problem. How do I go from this text? How do I go from this text to this profile? I want to create an instance of this guy now, right? I have to somehow be able to parse this thing and be able to create an instance of profile from this. Well, can I just use these markers? Well, I don't know. OpenAI might, like another call might come up with a different way of formatting this, because I haven't given it any information about how to format. I have the things that I've picked up at random. Those are fine. I can create, assign it to those values. So for example, over here, I've got age, gender, and ethnicity. All right. I can create a new profile and I can assign these values. The challenge is in this stuff: the first name, last name, and Myers-Briggs personality type and a Tinder bio. How do I get those values and insert that, like assign that to the profile record? That's a challenge. And that is where function calling comes in. What is function calling? Function calling is a way for you to tell OpenAI that what you want as a response is not just arbitrary text. We want it to actually be structured almost as if it's calling a function. You're saying, hey, I have a function which takes the first name, last name, age, and bio and all that as parameters. So make sure you use a structured JSON to call those things. Okay, so I'm going to register a custom function which takes in all of the things that are necessary for creating a profile and saying, hey, OpenAI, I don't want you to give me text. I want you to call a function which takes in first name as a string, last name as a string, bio as a string. All right. And now what it's going to do is it's going to split that up and create a JSON where there is a first name value, last name value, and so on. And then I'm going to use that function to create the profile. Okay. Let me tell you how that works. I'm going to go here to profile creation service. What do I need to do? I need to create a function. Okay, I'm going to create a function. I'm going to call this, let me collapse this thing here. I'm going to call this save profile. Okay, and this is going to be a function that is going to take a profile and it is going to do system out println of profile. All right. And now this is going to be a function that takes in a profile and returns maybe a Boolean, right? It returns true or false, okay? So this is a function. Let me import function here, okay? Now what I have here is a function which takes in a profile and then it returns a Boolean and say return true. Okay, the return type doesn't matter now, okay? Now I have a function which takes in a profile, okay? Anything that calls this function, right? The input argument is a profile. Anything that calls this function needs to have a profile instance. Okay, now what if I tell the OpenAI API that what I want as an output is not arbitrary text, but instead I want it to be a call to this function, right? That's the point of function calling, right? We are structuring the prompt in such a way that we are not saying, give me some arbitrary text output. We are structuring the prompt in such a way that OpenAI knows, the API knows, that the output needs to be a call to this thing. Now, it is going to examine the type of the input argument, which happens to be profile, and it is going to structure the output in such a way that this function is callable from that output. So basically it creates a JSON, okay? So in order to make this work, I need to create a method that returns this function, okay? I'm going to create that method now. Let's say public, and this is going to return the function. So I'm going to have this be the return type. Get function to call, and this is going to return this function. Okay, now get function to call is a very odd name because guess what? The function that we pass into OpenAI also needs to tell it what that function does. So I'm going to say this is a save profile function. Okay, I want it to save profile, and here's where I'm actually going to save the profile. Right now I'm printing into the console, but I'm going to have this save it somehow, and then I'm going to say, hey, OpenAI, when you're calling this, Tinder bio, generate this Tinder bio, and save the profile using the save profile function. Okay, I'm saying, hey, I have a function that I want you to call, not just give me an arbitrary output. And now I'm going to say, hey, here is a save profile function that you can call, and then it'll know exactly what to do. Now this has to be a Spring Bean. Okay, so I'm going to say at bean so that I mark it as a Spring Bean, because guess what? I'm going to build a function with this thing. This needs to be a Spring Bean. Now just telling it to use the save profile function is not enough. Now the prompt doesn't know what that function is, right? This thing has no idea what that function is, right? Now how do I tell it what the function is? Well, let's look at the documentation. There is function calling. Basically what it does is it tells the chat client that there is a function that needs to be called, okay? So first thing you need to do is register functions as beans, right? So you're going to say this is a bean. Here is a function that is being passed in, okay? It's a weather function which returns some mock weather service, whatever that is, right? You're telling the OpenAI client that there is a function that it needs to call. It's not going to call the function, of course. What you're doing is you're basically providing a structure for the output so that the thing that actually kind of orchestrates this whole thing, which is your chat client, can then take that output and call this function, okay? All you're doing is somehow influencing the language model to return a response in a way so that this client can take that response and call this function. So you're basically telling OpenAI, hey, I have a client here who's calling you, and this client expects to call this function as a result of your response. So you better respond in such a way so that my client can call this function. That's what we're telling OpenAI. OpenAI goes, okay, tell me the function details, and I'm going to structure my response in such a way that your client can call that function. So we tell OpenAI about this thing, and then OpenAI does its best to return an output in a way that this function is callable. And now this chat client goes, okay, I have gotten a response and I know how to call this function, and it is going to actually call it. So that's basically function calling, okay? OpenAI cannot call a function in your code. What you're telling OpenAI is to structure your output in such a way that the chat client in your code can call the function in your code just by looking at the response from OpenAI, right? We're just asking OpenAI to play nice. All right, let's take a look at the example. What do we need to do? First, we need to give it the @bean annotation. All right, so the function that returns the function to be called needs to be annotated with @bean. Okay, what else? I need a description. So I'm going to get the description annotation. I'm going to describe this function. Let's import the class, and description is org Spring Framework context annotation. That looks right. This is going to be save the profile information. Should be pretty obvious, but just a description anyway. All right, now what next? We need to, I think, somehow register the function. Okay, here it is, right? We are going to do a chat client.call with the new prompt, and then we also pass in the function. You're going to say OpenAI chat options builder, build it with this function, right? You're going to create a chat client call, not just with the prompt, but also with a function registered. So you're basically saying, hey, OpenAI, here is a prompt, and here is the function that I would like to call as a result of your response. So here you go, give me an output that is suitable enough for me to call this function. All right, that's what this is doing. So we need to pass this function information to OpenAI so that it can give us the right output. So I'm going to say this prompt is over here. This is the first argument, and this is going to be the second argument, I think. New prompt. Oh, it is a part of the prompt itself. Okay, so this is this. All right, so we're going to have a prompt which takes in a string as well as this builder thing, okay? And I'm going to pass in this name. It's not current weather. The function name is saveprofile.build. Now what's going to happen is when we say do this, get a response, I don't think I need to print this out, but we will see. When I do this, it is going to return it in a way that the save profile can be called, and now this services are going to actually call this. It's actually going to call this and then print out the profile. Just to illustrate that, I'm going to do another print and then say, this is the function that we expect to be called by Spring AI by looking at the OpenAI response. Okay, we expect Spring to call this function by looking at the response because we have told OpenAI what that should be. All right, let's run this. I have no idea if this works, but we will see. I'm going to run, stop and rerun. This time, we are not just passing the prompt, we are also passing the function. And now look at that. Look at that. We have passed in the prompt. That's the string prompt, and we say save the profile using the save profile function. And guess what? It has called the function. Spring has called the function because it got the exact response that it needed to call the function. Look at that. It's called the function and it has created a profile instance. It doesn't have an ID, of course, but look at that. It has broken down the name. So what was the prompt? It was a 35-year-old Asian female. Now it has created a first name, a last name. The age is there, ethnicity, gender, all the stuff is basically created exactly like we want it to. This is awesome, isn't it? The image URL is null. Of course, we're going to create the image URL. It has gotten the Myers-Briggs personality type as just those 4 letters. So we are good to go. Now imagine if I were to do this, okay? Imagine over here, instead of just printing it, let's say I created a list of profiles over here, right? I'm going to say private list of profiles. Let's say this is generated profiles. Okay, and I'm going to initialize this to a new array list. And over here, after printing this, I'm going to say this dot generated profiles dot add of the profile that got generated. Now imagine if I run this a couple of times and save it to this list. At the end of this method, when it is done, I'm going to have a bunch of profiles created. Isn't that cool? Now let's say I run this n times. I have a number of profiles. Let's say I run this n times. And I'm not going to do a get first here. Int age in ages. All right. And then inside this, I'm going to say for gender in genders. I'm going to have one more for ethnicity in ethnicities. This is a string, not ethnicity, sorry. All right, now I have 3 loops here. I'm going to run this prompt once for each combination. Okay, so I'm going to have n combinations of this thing, and close these loops, and I'm going to have a counter, right? If over here, I'm going to say if, what is this? Generated profiles, right? This dot generated profiles dot size is greater than number of profiles, I'm going to just return. Okay, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to return. And otherwise, I'm going to keep doing this, and it is going to print the value, and it is going to add it to the profile. All right, now let's call this with, let's say, 5 profiles. Okay, I'm going to have it generate 5 profiles. So what this is going to do is basically loop through, and every time it creates a profile, it is going to save it to this list. And once it's more than 5, it is going to exit. Once it's greater than or equal to number of profiles, it'll just return. Okay, let's run this now. It should ideally create 5 profiles, add them all to that list. So it's calling the API 5 times. Okay, let's take a look at that. 3, 4, and 5. There you go. What's funny is it's created the name Alex for the first name Alex for all of these profiles, but it's basically created 5 profiles. Look at that. And it has a list. Now what I can do is I can insert these values into a JSON file. Okay. I understand that this is kind of limiting in the sense that we have a lot of combinations. So this is going to lead to a lot of API calls. So for each combination of these values, which is what I'm doing over here, okay, make a call to OpenAI, get a sample Tinder profile for these variables, which is what I'm doing over here. Okay, I'm making a call to OpenAI and getting a sample Tinder profile. Now, at the end of this, when I'm done, and here is where I have generated enough profiles, right? I have a bunch of profiles. I have enough profiles. What do I need to do? I need to save the values into a JSON file, right? I need to save the values into a JSON file over here. So that's what I'm going to do over here, okay? I'm going to say save the generated profiles into a JSON file, all right? How do I save it? I'm going to say save profiles to JSON. Let's create a method like this. And why don't I just pass in this dot generated profiles? I know this is a method in the same class, but still, I'll just pass this in. Okay, I have the generated profiles here now. I need to save this to a file. All right, now I'm going to create a path name over here. I'm gonna say private static final profiles file path equals, I'm going to call this profiles.json. This is going to be a string. And here I'm going to say file equals new file of profiles file path, right? I'm going to create a new file, and now I need to basically convert generated profiles into JSON. Okay, I'm probably going to use JSON for this, right? New JSON, is JSON available? All right, look at that. JSON is available in the class path, which is cool. Okay, so I'm going to say new JSON dot to JSON of the generated profiles. This is how you convert something to JSON, right? In Java, you say new JSON. JSON is a Google library for working with JSON, right? It constructs a new JSON object, and then you say do JSON on top of it, and then pass in whatever is the object that you want converted to JSON, and it is going to convert this to JSON. This is going to be a string, right? JSON string equals this. And now what I need to do is basically just save it to file, right? I'm going to say new file writer of this properties file path. I don't need to do this. I didn't need to do this, right? New file writer, and then let's run with try catch. Say file writer equals new file writer, and then file, all right, this is writer dot write of JSON string, and then writer dot close. Okay, I'm opening a file, writing the JSON string, and then closing it. I don't need to do this. Okay, I have an object which is a list of profiles. I need to save it as JSON in a file. How do I do it? First, I convert it to a JSON string using the JSON library to JSON, pass in the object, I get a JSON string. Then I write to a file. I say open file writer for the property file path, write the JSON string, and close the file. And of course, I have to catch this IO exception if for some reason it is unable to write the file. I'm just going to error out. Okay, let's run this again. Okay, and well, we still have to save it to MongoDB. That part isn't done, but let's at least make sure that it is writing to JSON to the file. All right, run this one more time. Again, it's going to make 5 calls to OpenAI, generate 5 properties, and once it's done, it should write to that file. All right, so it has created a bunch of profiles. Let's see if it has created the file profiles.json. Here it is. Okay, so it's created a bunch of profiles here. Let's format this. Okay, so it's created a bunch of profiles in a JSON format, which is perfect. This is exactly what we wanted to do. And now we have it. So all we need to do now is create a bunch more, save it into this JSON file. And once we have this done, we can insert these values into the database. Now, there are a couple of optimizations that I want to do over here. First of all, this is going to be an expensive operation, right? Creating profiles is going to make multiple OpenAI calls, and we do not know if we want to do this every time, right? We probably want to initialize this once, and after it's done, we don't want to do it again. So I want this to be conditional, right? Some kind of a setting in the property file that says initialize profiles true or false. And by default, we set it to false. If we set it to true, then it's going to go do this thing. But if it's not true, then it's basically going to skip the whole profile creation service, right? Just some ways for us to not run a huge OpenAI bill unless we really intend to, okay? I'm going to make a couple of changes like this to kind of optimize how much I'm going to be paying OpenAI for generating these profiles, all right? So that's going to be the first step. So what I'll do is I will have a conditional flag, which is basically say initialize profiles, make it true or false, okay? So this is my profile creation service. Over here, I'm going to have, let's say, a Boolean flag here, private Boolean initialize profiles, all right? This is going to be controlled by a property file config, okay? So I'm going to annotate it with an @value annotation that is going to read basically like, let's call it like a startup action and then initialize profiles, okay? So I'm going to go here to my properties file, main resources properties, and we have a bunch of properties here already. So I'm going to say startup actions dot initialize profiles, and I'm going to set this to true, right? Now I'm going to read this in my profile creation service, and this is going to be the @value annotation, okay? This is not a literal string, so I'm going to have to put the $curly for reading this, okay? So this is going to be a $curly, which is basically saying, get me whatever is the value that I have in my property file, and then use that. And only if that is set to true, I'm going to do this stuff. Otherwise, I'm not going to do any of this, right? So I'm going to say if not this dot initialize profiles, I'm basically just going to bail. I'm going to say return, right? We don't have to do anything here. It's just going to skip this whole thing, all right? Let's verify this, set this to false, and then let's run this. It should basically skip the whole profile creation piece. Yeah, my Docker daemon has stopped. Let me restart it and run it again. All right, look at that. So it's completely skipped the profile creation piece, and it just hard-coded, it's just running the two hard-coded profiles. Great. I'm going to put this back, make this true. All right. The second thing I'm going to do is make the selection of the profiles that we want to create be a little less, okay? So I'm basically going to have a looking for property. I'm going to say Tinder AI dot looking for gender. This is going to be the gender that the person is looking for a match. So when you sign up for Tinder, you're going to be like, okay, are you looking for, male matches or female matches or whatever, right? So you basically set that preference. For the sake of convenience, I'm going to pick one gender, and I happen to be heterosexual male. So I'm going to be like, if I were using Tinder now, I would pick looking for females. So I'm just going to make this as female. Now let me actually make this be the exact gender that I have over here, which is literally female, all caps. So I'm just going to make this female so that I can basically pick that and get the gender enum value from it. So here I'm going to add that as well. This is going to be looking for gender, and then this is the property. Okay, so now when I have this, I don't need to create a loop of genders anymore. It's just going to be one gender. I'm going to remove this. That's the stuff here. So it's not going to be a loop of genders. We basically saved one loop, okay? And we're going to try and optimize it a little bit further. So this is going to be gender. Well, actually we have gender is a string. So basically I can just pass that as a string. Gender equals this dot looking for gender. And since I don't plan to map it to an enumeration, I'm basically just putting the gender here. Don't need gender.toString anymore. This is just gender. So I'm not going to make it female. I'm just going to call this woman. Okay, I don't plan to map it to an enumeration, right? So it's okay, I can just call it woman, and it's going to go as woman, and then you can choose whatever gender you want, right? Add that to the property file, and it is going to generate profiles for the gender of your choice. I'm not going to restrict ethnicity. I'm basically going to have it be all of these ethnicities. Perhaps I'm going to add one. I'm Indian, and Asian usually does not accommodate Indian with the test that I've run with OpenAI. So I'm just going to add one more ethnicity, which is Indian. Okay, and that should be it. Ages can perhaps be random between, I don't know, 20 and 50. That's what I'm thinking, but I'll just leave it like this for now. That should be fine. And now we have this. Let's run this one more time. And this time in my properties, in my application.properties, I have initialize profile set to true, and then I have looking for gender. So it should generate profiles for only women, right? Let's see. I'm going to run this again. All right. So it's creating a bunch of profiles. And I don't know, how many do I have here? I have 5. So it should create 5 profiles and save it to files.json. There you go. It has created this. And if I format the code, here are the profiles. One other thing that I might perhaps do is to kind of retain these profiles and not basically just blow them away. Because right now, every time I run it, it's basically going to throw away the old profiles and recreate everything from the scratch. Again, in an effort to save costs on OpenAI, what I'm going to do is once the profiles are created, it's not going to go away unless I manually remove it. Every time I'm saving the profile, I'm going to add to the profiles, not just blow it away. One way to do this is when I'm creating the generated profiles array list, instead of creating an empty array list, I can read from profiles.json, okay? Which is what I'm going to do over here. I'm going to not throw away, I'm going to read from profiles.json and initialize this so that how many ever I add over here, it is going to, no, I cannot do that because that would affect the number of profiles created. If I say create 5, but then it already has 10, it would never create anything. So how about I do it over here? Okay, over here, after the profiles have been created and it's time to save, I'm not going to just add to this. I'm going to first read what file is already available, right? So I'm going to say profiles file path, right? And now again, I'm going to use JSON to convert that string. I'm going to read this file, get the string, and I'm going to convert that to a list. I'm basically going to do the opposite of what I did here. Here, I'm taking the generated profiles and converting it into a string. Well, now what I need to do is take that string and convert it into the list. All right, I'm going to say new file reader to read this file. Actually, I don't even need this. I'm basically going to do profiles file path. I need a file reader, right? Import this thing. And I think I'm going to have to catch the exception. I'm going to use add exception to the existing one. All right, I'm going to put this here, move the try up, and now add it to the existing try catch. I'm going to create the JSON object up over here because I'm going to need this equals new JSON. And now here I'm going to say JSON from JSON because now I'm reading a string. I'm going to get the JSON string and convert it into an object. Now, when I'm converting a JSON string into an object, I need to specify what the type is. And I use that by specifying a type token. Okay, so there is a new type token, which is what JSON library uses to reflect and identify what is the thing that you're asking it to convert to an object. Okay, so I need to specify what the type is. What is the type that I'm trying to convert? It's a list of profiles, right? So I'm going to say this is going to be an array list of profile. This is the type that I want converted. Okay, and I'm going to close this. And now this is going to give me the type.get type. Okay, this is how, let me put this back over here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, explaining this, but basically this is how you get a certain object out of JSON using the JSON library. Okay, and this is going to be list of profile. Okay, these are the existing profiles, and I'm going to break this down here. List from JSON. That's this and this. Okay, this is how you take a JSON value and then convert it into an object. If the first thing is specifies the string, second thing is the type that that object should have. and then it's going to take that string, which is going to assume to be a JSON of that type, and it's going to use this type, and it's going to give you the existing profiles. Okay, now what do I need to do? I need to add the existing profiles to what is already there, right? So I'm going to say generated profiles dot add all of existing profiles, right? I don't want them to go away. And now this is basically saving those values back to the string, back to the file. Okay. Now I get the generated profiles and I'm going to add the existing profiles to it. And now I convert the whole thing back to a JSON string, and then I'm going to write it to a file like you would want it to do. So now let me run this again. Now let's look at the profile. So I have a bunch of profiles. I have 5 profiles. All right. So let's remember the first name, Ayana Storm. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Ayana. Okay. So I'm going to copy this and let's rerun. And this time it should open this file, use the existing values, and then save it. What is this? It's throwing in. Okay, I think I have to. Unreported exception must be caught or thrown. All right, let's try to catch the exception. It's throwing a file not found exception. So let's catch this. Or file not found exception E. Okay. And okay, I don't need a file not found exception here because I'm already catching IO exception. All right, let's run it. And this time it should read the existing contents. And there is another Ayana, but what we need is Ayana Storm. So let's see if it gets that. Seems like there's a lot of repetition in the names, but it's okay. All right, so it's done it. Let's go to the profiles and format. Now, if you look at the generated profiles, let's find another Ayana. All right, Ayana Storm is here. But these were the profiles that were already created, right? So it's not going to go away anymore. We're just adding on to it. Every time we run, we keep adding on more profiles, which is good. Okay. All right, now to generate images, there are a couple of software that we need to install, okay? The software that I'm going to use is something called Automatic 1111. It is a client which you download and install on your machine, and it also has the ability to talk to an image generation model. Okay, this is true for a lot of these softwares. You have the model itself, which is a file that you download. You can have different models, you can talk to different models. Download the model, and then you download the software which forms a uniform interface to talk to that model. You can use that same software to talk to model 1, same software to talk to model 2, and you can choose which model you want to use for your generation. You download models, and then you say, hey, I want to talk to this model, generate an image with this model, and you can choose which model you want to talk to, right? That's the software we're going to use, and I'm going to show you how to install it and set it up for API access. Because remember, we are not going to the software manually and generating an image. We have 100 profiles. We need an automated way of doing this. So we're going to write code to call the API of the software so that the model generation, the image generation piece happens automatically. Let me show you how I do it. So this is the Stable Diffusion Web UI by Automatic 1111. This is the UI that will help us run Stable Diffusion on our machines, right? This is the client. Now, first thing you need to do is download and install this UI on your machine, right? So you have to download and install this project. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about what this is, right? Stable Diffusion Web UI is a web interface for Stable Diffusion implemented using Gradio library. Stable Diffusion is a text-to-image generation model or a family of models, and Gradio is a web UI library for Python, which allows you to write simple code that creates the web UI like this. You can generate controls and you can have it host on a local web server. So this is the project that will load your text-to-image models, right? There are text-to-image and image-to-image models. You have one-click install and run a script that you can just download and install. So here, you scroll down to the installation section. So here for Windows, you have a one-click download and install script, right? So here is the zip file, and then you run the update.bat and run.bat, and you can have it up and running on Windows. You also have installation on Mac and Linux. So this is the Linux instructions where you can get the sh file from GitHub, download it and run it. On Apple Silicon, this is the instruction over here, which is a little more involved, but basically what you do is you install Homebrew, and then you install a bunch of libraries and utilities that are necessary. Then you do a git clone of this repo, right, which is exactly this repo, Stable Diffusion Web UI. And then you place the models and checkpoints in this particular directory, and then you run webui.sh. Okay, so I'm going to do this because I'm on Mac, and also this seems to be the most complicated of the lot. The others are basically just download an sh file and you're good to go. Right now, here, along with the Stable Diffusion web UI, there are also links for downloading the models themselves, and there is a link to Hugging Face, which contains a lot more of these models. So all these models here are text to image models. You see there is a text to image filter selected. So all these are text to image models. So you can download any one of these and save it into your Stable Diffusion Web UI folder, and your Stable Diffusion Web UI client can load these models and help you generate images from text using those models. All right. Now let's first go and download and install this. So I'm going to clone this Stable Diffusion Web UI. I already have these things installed. I use Homebrew, and I already have these libraries installed using Homebrew, so I'm not going to run them again. I'm just going to open terminal. Here I'm going to go to the code directory, and I'm going to paste this command, which is basically going to do a git clone. And it is going to clone this to my code directory. And up here, I'm going to switch to this directory, and here is the contents. Now here I have the webui.sh, which is what I need to run. You see here it says just run webui.sh. Now in webui.sh, if I were to open this, you can see that you can pass in arguments to this thing. Okay, you can pass in command line arguments. And let's see, there must be something here which lets you pass in arguments. Perhaps it's webui user, webui-user.sh. Okay, here you go. Here are the command line arguments. I'm going to add the command line arguments --API and then --share. Okay, these things let you start an API, right? --API lets you start up an API when you start Stable Diffusion Web UI. --share is necessary when you're running it on a different machine. Okay, it lets you get a Gradio URL that you can hit. I am going to be using --share because I'm going to run Stable Diffusion on my Windows machine. That's where my Stable Diffusion Web UI is going to run. That's where all the models are available. Okay, and it gives me, share gives me a publicly accessible URL that I can later go and access from my Mac laptop. If you're running Stable Diffusion on the same machine as you're coding, you don't need to do --share. You just need --API. All right, I'm going to save this, and I'm going to run webui-user.sh. I'm going to have to change permission. chmod +x webui user.sh, and now I can run webui-user.sh, and I'm going to have Stable Diffusion up and running. Now, before I do this, I want to make sure I have the models downloaded. So if you look at the directories here, so there is one directory called models, all right? So if you switch to models, you will see there are a bunch of directories here, and there is one called Stable Diffusion. It's literally called Stable Diffusion. So I'm going to switch to Stable Diffusion, and here you will see one file, a dummy file, which says put Stable Diffusion checkpoints here.txt. What you can do is you can go over here, get one of these checkpoints and download them. all right? And you can basically place the file over there. So for example, let's say I want to download this one, Realistic Vision for no VAE, okay? I'm going to go over here to the files and folders, and I have this file here, safe tensors, right? You're going to download a file that says the name .safe tensors. There are other checkpoints in painting, no EMA, you can skip all that. Just download safe tensors. I'm going to put it in this directory here, which is in the Stable Diffusion directory under models. All of these models would have a directory like this, right? So let's say you go to this one, Juggernaut X, which is another pretty decent model. So go to files and versions, and you should see, you see here, there is a safe tensors. So you can pick one of these models, you can browse through them, and you can look at what you prefer. There are a few that I personally like that I'm going to put a link in the description. But some of these, like I play around with this, and some of these I recognize, like Epic Realism seems to be a good one, which generates pretty decent and interesting images. So there are plenty here. And you also have this website called civit.ai. This is what this thing is linked to. This is another source of models, right? Civit.ai has a whole lot of models, a whole lot of images that have been generated with these models, and they have a very active community behind this as well. So all of these are available for you to download and play around with this. The only thing that I would warn you though is that this is both a combination of safe for work and not safe for work content, as well as safe and not safe for work models. Some of these models actually generate not safe for work content, so you got to be careful about that. But overall, this is a really good place to download models, and the model that I'm going to download is actually from Civit AI. So you're going to download that and save it into the checkpoint directory in Stable Diffusion, right? You save it in the Stable Diffusion directory, and then you're going to go back and run web UI-user.sh. You can also run web UI.sh. I've turned on the API feature, right? The API feature allows me to make API calls to this server once it's started, and I can actually get text to image and image to image responses through API and through the code, which, as we know, is important. We're going to be doing that. Okay, so this is a Stable Diffusion web UI, which looks super confusing because there are a lot of parameters and a lot of configuration here. But at a high level, the idea is simple. You start out with a model selection, right? You see here that at the top you have Stable Diffusion checkpoint. This is basically the model that you're going to choose for running the image generation. You have a bunch of models over here. You can pick any one of these to run Stable Diffusion. Okay, there are a bunch over here, and these are stuff that I've downloaded from Civit AI, and I'm going to share the link in the description and all the associated resources about how to get these models. But you're going to download a model and have it available in that folder so that this shows up over here. You know, you add a new model, you add that and click refresh. It is going to refresh it and it's going to make this available. The model that I'm going to use for what we are going to be generating is called Cyberrealistic XL, right? This is V10. There are probably other versions. I don't know what's the latest version that's released when you are watching this, but this is the model that I'm going to choose. And again, I'm going to link that in the resources. This is the model that we are going to request to generate images, right? This is the first option. Pretty much all of these other options you can skip. The important one is the prompt over here, right? You can enter a prompt and it is going to have it generate an image, right? So let's say a cute puppy. Okay, I click the prompt and then I click this generate button. Okay, and I click on generate. It is going to make a call to my server which is running, and it is going to generate this image. You see here, it's a pretty realistic image, and this is one of the reasons why I want to use this model, because it generates pretty good images. And we're gonna have a bunch of things that we're gonna tweak to make it even more realistic. But this is the idea, right? We choose a model, you enter a prompt, and then you click on generate. There are a few things that I'm going to change though. The one thing that I'm going to change first is the width and the height. You see here, there is a width and a height drop down. This lets us choose the dimensions of the image that we are generating. I think maybe 512 by 512 is fine for now. I don't know. Well, I'll leave it for now, and we will revisit it if we feel like it's not good enough. But if you want to change it, this is what you're going to do, right? You're going to change the width and the height. Be careful though. After a certain point, this thing goes nuts. Okay, so let's say I have like a huge width and height. It does crazy stuff. It tries to fill in the real estate with a lot of stuff. So usually you'll end up with a whole lot of crazy, weird shapes and multiple puppies and one puppy's head coming out of another puppy's stomach and all that weird stuff, right? Let me demonstrate what I mean. You might still do a good job and prove me wrong, but I have a feeling that the bigger this goes, well, actually did a pretty good job. In my opinion, the bigger this goes, the weirder it gets, okay? So be careful with it. I'm just gonna choose 512 by 512 for now. Okay, now I'm gonna disable high-res fix. We don't want high-res fix, we don't want refiner. All right, so this is basically the premise of how this works. Now, what we wanna do is not generate images of puppies, we want images of these Tinder profiles. So let me go over here to this profile, and I'm going to basically copy the stuff. All right, let's take this one because this doesn't have special characters. I'm gonna copy this and paste this here. This is basically the profile, but I don't want to run this right now, interrupt. What I'm going to do is say generate a Tinder profile image of, and then the name. I am pretty sure the name doesn't matter so much, but it'd be good to have that. A 40-year-old Asian woman with the following bio. Okay. All right, let's say who is. Okay. This again, passionate about art, literature, and exploring the world. How does that influence what a person looks like? I don't know, maybe it does, but I'm just going to add it there to kind of bring in an additional dimension to the image that is generated. Okay. I can also bring in the Myers-Briggs personality type. An INFJ 40-year-old. All right, let's do this. I'm going to click generate. And this should generate, at least with that particular ethnicity, that age, looks like that age, and has some of this personality traits. Okay, this is not too bad. It's not too bad. It's not great. So there are some weirdness associated with it. But all right, let's remove Tinder because it seems to be adding the hearts here for some reason. Maybe it's because I have Tinder there. All right, let's say profile image. Let's do one more. And we have this one, which is not bad. It's okay, right? Again, if you look long enough, you can identify a bunch of mistakes and things that clearly tell you that this is an AI generated image, but for now this will do. There are a bunch of things that we can do to make this a little bit better. And one thing which works really well is a negative prompt, right? So you see here there's a text box called negative prompt. This allows you to tell it what are the things that you don't want. Okay, so for example, you don't want poor quality. Okay, it seems obvious, but this is something that tells the model that this is something that you don't want, right? Because the model can generate poor quality images if you want it to, and that's a part of the possible outputs that it can generate. You need to tell it, hey, I don't want poor quality, I want actually good quality images, right? There are a bunch of negative prompts that usually work well with Stable Diffusion. I'm going to pull up a bunch of those and add them over here. All right, so I've copied over a bunch of negative prompts. Again, these are things that we don't want it. Bad anatomy. Yes, we don't want. We don't want extra limbs, right? Stuff like this. Again, these seems simple and obvious, but these are things that sometimes work with some models and basically gets a better output, all right? So I'm going to add these as negative prompts. This is what we want, and this is what we do not want. And again, we can have it render another image. There we go. We have one more, which I don't know if it's any better, but it's okay. It's okay. All right. So we have this way of generating images, which we're going to use for all of the profiles that we have. But then, of course, we can't just come here and copy paste these things and click it. We need an API that we want to call, right? We want to be able to call this Stable Diffusion API from our code, right? From our code here. Basically, when the profile creation service has created these profiles, what you need to do is generate the image and save it to the JSON file as well, all right? So our profile has an image URL string, right? We want to make a call to this Stable Diffusion API, pass in the prompt, generate the image, and then save the image somewhere over here, and then link it to this profile so that when it gets saved to MongoDB, well, it is going to link to the image that was generated for this profile, right? Let's make a call to this API and do that next. But at a high level, this is what we're doing, right? We are using this thing called Stable Diffusion, which is a local way of generating images, right? You download a model and you give it a prompt, a positive prompt and a negative prompt. It is going to generate an image. What we do here, what we just did here in the UI, is what we're going to be doing via an API. And the image that gets generated is what we are going to download and save it in our project. So now if you go to the Stable Diffusion Web UI URL /docs, it'll show you the API documentation for these endpoints, all right? The thing that we are interested in is the text to image generation, which is this API here, right? This is the /sd API /v1 /text to image. And here is the parameter body, right? We're going to make a post request to this thing. Here, some of these should be obvious, right? You have a prompt and you have a negative prompt, which correspond to this string and this string. There are a few more parameters for some of the other things that we've sent, right? So you have width 512, height 512. And in fact, if you go to this extension, API payload extension, it'll show you what are the API payloads that you need to pass in to get whatever you've entered, right? You type in this thing in the UI and then go look at the API payload. It's going to tell you, hey, if you had to do this in the API, this is what you would need to do, all right? And here are a bunch of API values that you can pass in. The important ones are what I would pick. The rest of the stuff are like, it's just going to pick the defaults, which is fine. So this is what we need to do to make a call to this, right? We're going to make a call, a post request to this URL, pass in these values, and it is going to get me back the image itself. And I'm going to take that image and I'm going to download it. And I will do this over here where I am generating the profile, right? When I'm generating the profile over here and it's time to perhaps save it over here, right? When I'm adding it to this thing, I'm also going to generate the images and I'm going to add it to the profile. Or maybe I can do that all at once when it is done. Like when I'm saving profiles to JSON, I can generate images for each of the ones where the images don't exist. And I can say, I kind of like that idea, right? So I'm going to go through this. I get the existing profiles, add the new ones. And then for all of the profiles, if any of these profiles do not have an image URL, then I'm going to basically generate the images, right? So I'm going to say for profile in generated profiles, if profile dot image URL equals null. Then I'm going to do generate image of, I'm going to say generate profile image of the profile. Let's say profile equals generate profile image of the profile. So it's going to do that, and then it's going to populate the profile image into the profile instance, and it is going to generate these values and save it to the file. Let's do this. Let's create an implementation of this profile image method in this class. I am now going to take this URL and copy it into my class, right? I'm going to have a static private static final string stable diffusion URL equals this. And I'm going to add the API part of it, which is this one. All right, we looked that up from the documentation. This is the URL to which we need to access. We need to make a post request in order to create these images. So, right, so this is the stable diffusion URL. Next, I'm going to go over here to the generate profile images. And now I need to create a image for this. So basically the goal is to get the profile details that have already been generated by OpenAI. Okay, make a post request to the stable diffusion URL. All right, save the image, the generated image, in the resources folder. Right, I want to save it in the same folder over here and kind of check this in to the code so that it's available. So people don't have to create this. If you want to just follow along and skip this part, you can do that. Right, I'm going to put it in the static. Maybe I'll create a new folder here, and I'm going to call it images. All right. This is where all the profile images are going to be stored. And then finally, I'm going to link the image name to the profile's image URL field, right? So this is useful so that when the front end makes a call to this profile, it knows to pick up the right image from the static.images, static/images folder. Okay, so this is what we need to do. So in order to, we already have the profile details, so we know that this is the profile. We need to make a post request. In order to make a post request, I need HTTP client, right? How do I get HTTP client? Well, I get it by declaring it and doing a new HTTP client, okay? So I'm going to have another class property here. We have chat client. I'm going to have private HTTP client, and then in the constructor, I'm going to say this dot HTTP client equals HTTP client dot new HTTP client, right? I'm going to initialize it so I can use this HTTP client for making a post request, right? I'm going to make a post request over here. Now, where do I make a post request? I make a post request to the Stable Diffusion web URL. Right, that's where it needs to go. Okay, so what I need to do is to maybe actually I can create a post request builder, because I need to do a builder where I send that specific request. So let me actually do that. I'm going to create a right over here and say private. This will be a HTTP request dot builder. This will be stable diffusion request builder. Okay. Once I have a builder, I can use it to create multiple images, make multiple requests. That's the whole point, right? So I'm going to say this dot stable diffusion request builder equals HTTP request dot new builder. I'm going to do a dot set header of the content type to be application/JSON because we are looking for a JSON request. And then I'm going to do a dot, then I'm going to say URI.create. And what is the URI that we need? We need stable diffusion URI. All right, stable diffusion URI. So now I have a stable diffusion request builder. So I don't have to do this for every request, right? I've done it once. I have a request builder, and it's going to set the content type to be this and the URI to be that. So I can directly make a call using that request builder. I can get a request from that request builder. That's the whole point. All right. So now I can go here and over here, I can get the profile, get the details, right? Get the request. Let me call it the request details. So what do I need to do? First, I need to get the prompt. I need to get the negative prompt, and I need the JSON that's going to go out as a post request, right? So let's say string prompt equals, all right? What did we use? Generate a profile picture of a profile dot. It'd be cool if we could use string templates. I'm not gonna do this because I don't want to overwhelm people with too many new things, but string templates is one way of doing it. I can do str dot and then use templates. I'm gonna have to update the I'm gonna have to update the language level as well, I assume, but I'm not going to do that now. All right, we can probably have that be a separate tutorial, but string templates are great for doing these kind of prompts. When I'm using AI prompts, creating them in Java, string templates are great for that. All right, create a profile picture for a dash year old, and then profile dot ethnicity plus profile dot gender. Okay, and then I'm going to do prompt equals prompt plus let me actually put a new line here. Okay, prompt equals prompt plus, I'm gonna have personality, and then I will pass in the profile dot Myers-Briggs personality type, and then new line, and then prompt equals prompt plus, and then bio. Then this is going to be profile dot bio. I think this should be fine. I don't want to add the name because the name is really just random and arbitrary. It should be okay. So now I have the prompt here, and there are a few keywords that I can use to make this just a little bit better. Again, just like the negative prompts that I talked about, there are things that you can add which kind of seem nonsensical, but it seems to work fine for the AI. So I'm going to copy over a bunch of things that make the generated image look good. Okay, so these are some keywords that I've noticed makes the generated image look like a real realistic picture. So I'm just going to add that to the prompt. Okay, nothing that really changes what we want out of it, except that it adds a little bit of quality to what is being rendered. All right, so this is the prompt, and now I'm going to have a string negative prompt equals, and I'm going to copy over the negative prompt that I already pasted. Again, standard stuff, basically this thing. I know it's crazy, but this is what makes a difference. So I'm just going to add that as a negative prompt. So I have the prompt and I have the negative prompt. Now I'm going to create the JSON string that needs to go out as the post request body, right? What do we need for the post request body? I have the prompt. Okay, since this is slash, I'm going to have to escape this prompt : and then I'm going to add the Okay, this is too painful. I am doing string templates. I'm sorry. This is this escape. This is bothering me. Okay, I'm going to do string templates. All right. So this is very simple. If you have something like this, you want to change this to string templates. Here's what you need to do. Okay, you do str dot in front of the string. All right, and then you're going to have to import this. Str is string template .str from java.lang. Okay, you import that, and then what you do is, instead of doing this whole plus nonsense, what you can do is you can basically just remove this stuff, put this inside the string, okay? And now this is basically just a literal string, right? It's not evaluating it. In order to evaluate it, what you need to do is put this in curly and put a slash in front. So now it evaluates it to be a string template, and basically it's going to plug this thing in. Now it is complaining because it's saying language level is not supported. A string template is not supported at language level 22. So I'm going to say set language level to 22 preview. Okay, so let it update that, and now string template is supported. Okay, now Java string template is a preview API, may be removed in a future release. That's fine. That's fine. If it gets removed, then we will tweak the syntax according to that. Now another thing I can do is, instead of creating multiple string templates, I can create multi-line strings, right? Like this. I have 3 quotes, and now I have a multi-line string. I don't have to do any of this stuff. All this is going to be inside that same multi-line string, okay? And let me show you how that looks now. I'm going to remove all these double quotes. Don't need any of this, okay? And I don't need the slash ends as well, okay? And I don't need the plus either. I don't need this. Okay, now I have this double quote. I'm going to have put one more quote here, and then see, this whole thing is a string now, okay? And I'm going to end this with 3 quotes, and now this whole thing is one string template. Now what is this complaining about? Illegal text start block. Okay, so I'm going to have to do this, okay? And basically create this stuff. Now I basically have to do the same syntax for all of the things that I want to plug in to the string template. Okay, profile.ethnicity, close, and then slash curly brace, close curly brace. You see how good this looks? It looks so much better. So much better. It's almost like a necessity when you're working with these prompts. You need string templates, otherwise your code looks so bad. Okay, bio is slash, and then curly, and then close curly, then ultra realistic masterpiece, whatever. All right, so now we have a prompt. Notice how cool this is. I have a prompt with a string template, but I'm basically saying this whole thing is one string with multiple lines even, and wherever you have this syntax, basically plug that value in. Okay, so it's going to create a string with all the values from profile, which is pretty cool. Negative prompt, I don't need a string template, so we are good. For the JSON string, yes, I do need a string template, str dot, and triple quotes. And then here, I'm going to move this up. Now I can use this without all that fancy escaping. Now this is going to be, again, an escaped prompt, comma, and then the negative prompt is going to be negative underscore prompt is going to be the negative prompt. There you go. This is our JSON string. So using string template, we've kind of made the code a lot more elegant without the escaping, without the plus double quotes and all that. It looks a little neater. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of str dot. It seems a little weird. And I'm also not a big fan of this slash, but I think it's basically just the legacy reasons why we need this. Otherwise, existing strings are going to break. I presume that's why you have all these extra characters. Oh, Java, what do you do? Okay, so I have the JSON string, which is basically the payload that's going to go out when I make a post request. Okay, now how do I make a post request? I have this dot stable diffusion request builder. Okay, I can use this request builder in order to make a new post request. So I do stable diffusion request builder dot post Okay, and here I can pass in the body publishers dot off string of the JSON string. I'm basically saying take this JSON string and post this in the body, okay, in the body of this post request. And then I do a dot build is going to give me the request itself. So there's a request builder, right? It's going to give me the HTTP request. And now I can send that request, okay? I'm going to say this dot HTTP client dot send of this HTTP request. And then I'm going to need the response, right? Whatever I get as a response, I'm going to basically take it as a string. So again, it's body handlers dot off string. So basically I'm saying just get me a string. Now I think I have to catch exception here. Unhandled exception. All right, I'm going to throw this in the method signature because why not? No, actually, I don't want to throw it in the method signature because if one thing fails, then the whole thing fails. I don't like it. All right, so I'm going to put this in a try catch. Okay, this, and then more actions, surround with try catch. All right, I'm going to say, this is, what is this? I'm going to put this in a local variable, introduce local variable, response. Okay, I'm going to have to put the response outside so that I can access it outside. And here I'm going to say response equals this. Okay, I can collapse the catch blocks. Okay, so I create a request. I get all this stuff here from a long surrounding method. Nah, it's fine. I'll just leave it there. So I create a request with the positive and the negative prompts, and then I make an HTTP request, send it to that endpoint, the Stable Diffusion endpoint, and then I'm going to get back a response. Now this response is going to contain an image, okay? I'm going to have to hold on to that image and save it, okay? So I can get, and here is where I'm going to cheat a little bit. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in getting that image and saving it, which is basically just technical details, which I'm sure you wouldn't be interested in seeing me type through. I'm just going to magically show you this code and explain what's happening. It took me a little bit to get this, and I just don't want to delay this tutorial with the nuances of how to download an image from an HTTP request and save it. It's not quite the interesting thing that you have come to this tutorial for, so I'm just going to breeze through this, right? So basically what I've done is I've created a record for image response, and I'm going to use this for converting from JSON to an instance, okay? So that's what I'm doing over here. I have the response from the client, which is basically going to contain a string with the base64 encoded image as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an image response, which is basically a string of images, which is what it returns, which is what the API returns really. And then I'm going to convert it into this image response. I need to give it a dot class. So I created this record on the fly to give it that dot class so that I can get back an instance. Now what I have here is a bunch of images, right? I have a dot images, which contains a list of base64 encoded strings. So I'm going to check if those images exist. If it exists, I'm going to get the first image. I'm just interested in one, right? The API endpoint supports multiple images, but I'm only requesting it to give me one image. So I'm just going to get the first image. Here I can in fact do get first. So I'm just going to replace that. I get the first string in that list, which is a base64 encoded image. I'm going to use the decoder to decode it, and I'm going to get the directory path over here, and I'm going to save it in whatever the image URL this profile has. You might be thinking, well, Kaushik, image URL doesn't exist. It is empty. We are creating the image here for this profile. How do you have an image URL? Well, I'm going to populate that before it comes over here, okay? So I get the image URL, whatever I've populated earlier, I'm just going to create a UUID, and I'm going to get the file path. Just make sure that the directory exists. If the directory doesn't exist, I create it. Well, it should be there. I've already created static.images, but just in case, okay? And then I'm going to do image out.write of this bytes. That's basically all this is, okay? In summary, I'm going to get back a list of strings which are base64 encoded images. Like you need to base64 decode to get the image, and I need to save it to file. So I'm going to get the first one, because every request we only care about one image, and I'm going to decode it, base64 decode, get this directory, and save it to that path, right? And I'm going to return profile. If anything fails, I'm going to return null. Now, the only thing I need to do is I need to populate image URL so that each one gets its own unique image URL. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a UUID over here, profile image. I'm going to say string UUID equals UUID dot random UUID dot toString. Okay, I'm going to get a string, and then I am going to, well, actually, let me do this over here. So right at the beginning, I'm going to set the ID and the profile URL. Okay, so I'm going to say profile. First, let me create a UUID, all right? So string UUID is equal to UUID dot random UUID dot toString, right? I'm going to create a UUID, and I'm thinking I will set both the ID of the profile and the image URL to be the same, right? The file name of the image and the ID is going to match. So in a way, I don't even need the image URL field. I can just get it from the ID, but it's there just in case. I'm just going to use both, all right? So I'm going to say profile with image, and profile with image, right, is going to be new profile, and I'm going to set the UUID to be the ID for this profile. And what are all the fields here? First name, last name, age, ethnicity, gender. All right, so this is going to be profile dot first name, profile dot last name, and then what? Age, ethnicity, gender, bio. Okay, profile dot age, profile dot ethnicity, profile gender, profile dot bio, and then I think we need the image URL and the Myers-Briggs personality type. And I'm again going to do UUID and then plus dot JPG. I think it's a .jpg. We can find out if it's a different URL, right? So this is going to be the image path. And then the last one is profile dot Myers-Briggs personality type. So I'm going to create a new profile with image. All right, I can just replace it with the existing profile. And now I can use this profile and also use the image URL to get the file path, right? And save the image. Okay, now I think this is good. Let us see. I'm going to run this, and it is going to generate the profile image for all profiles which don't have an image URL, right? So when something is saved, it is obviously going to have that image URL, and it is not going to generate it again. But when you're generating something new for the first time, it is going to generate that image URL for it. Okay, so let me run this again, and we will verify if this works. Okay, so I'm going to go run Tinder backend application. Okay, now it's creating 5 more profiles because I've asked it to do this. And okay, now has it created any images? No, it hasn't. I'm going to stop. All right, now I'm going to debug this with the number of profiles being set as 0. And I'm going to go all the way over here to set a breakpoint where I'm generating the profile image, right? So somewhere over here, right? I have the prompt and the negative prompt. I'm going to verify the JSON string is right. I've set the steps to be 40, which is basically how many times the Stable Diffusion model kind of iterates over the image. Just a random number here. You can probably set anywhere between like 30, 40, 70, 80. It should be fine. You should get pretty decent results with that. So I'm going to set a breakpoint here, and I'm going to start debugging, and we will test this. Okay, so it is going to loop through all of the profiles that we've already generated over here, right? We have a bunch of profiles that we already generated in profile.json. So it is going to loop through all of them and basically create these images, right? So I have the JSON string over here, which is this thing, okay? So I have the prompt and I have the negative prompt, and I have the steps as 40. Okay, I'm going to make a request to get the HTTP request, right? I'm going to build the HTTP request with this JSON string as the body, and now I'm going to send it to my Stable Diffusion endpoint, right? This is where it's actually going to send the request and it is going to generate the response. It takes a while for the image to respond. So depending on your hardware, this might be like, I don't know, 10, 20 seconds or maybe even a minute. So I have a response here. Let's take a look. I get 200. And if you look at the body, you see here, it has images as the property, and then it has one string, which is the base64 encoded image itself, which is the reason why I have this record, right? I basically have a list of images. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this string, the response that I've gotten back, into this image response instance. So you see here, now this image response instance has images, and there is one value in that list, which is basically this image. So I'm going to check, is this empty? No, it's not empty. So I'm going to get the base64 image, and then I'm going to convert it. I'm going to decode it to bytes. So I'm going to get this byte array, which is the image, and I'm going to get the directory where I need to save this. You remember, it's src main resources, static images, right? So this one, src main resources, static images. Okay, so I'm going to get the file path to be the image URL, which is, what's the image URL for this profile? It is this guy here, all right? I'm going to get the full file path, get the directory, make sure the directory exists, it exists. Now I'm going to write to the file, and it has successfully written to the file. Now let's see, has this written something? Now over here, there is the image. Well, it has created the image for this profile, right? So this is the 20-year-old Hispanic female with this profile. Awesome. And now it has linked that image file name to this profile. So I'm going to keep going, continue. And now the profile has, of course, it's out of the scope now. So it's going to keep going and generate another profile. And I'm going to skip the breakpoint now. Let it run and do its thing. So it is going to constantly make these requests, and we should see this constantly increasing in the number of files that we have. Reload from disk. So you see here, there are a bunch of images that have been created. Okay, so these are the profile images for those profiles, and it is basically constructing the whole thing in memory. So I'm going to let this run for a bit, and once it's finished running, it is going to have the list of images in memory and this generated profiles member variable. This is then going to go to profiles.json, where it is going to get updated. Set a breakpoint here so that this is where all of the profile generation, all the profile image generation is complete, and we are going to examine the result here. Okay, so it has finished generating for all of them. So let's take a look at this list. First of all, let's verify that we have all of the images over here, right? So I'm going to say reload from disk, and it seems to have created a bunch of images here. And now let's look at the generated profiles. And this is an array list of 15 images. And here, oh, you see a problem. For some reason, the image URL is not being populated, and neither is the ID. I have a feeling that I am not updating this. So what I get back over here, I need to update the list. Ah, I missed that. See, that's the problem. So when I generate a profile image, I get this, right? So I need to update the list with the new profile. Okay, so I need to say, let me create a new list here. I'm going to say list of profiles with images equals new array list, right? I'm going to create an empty array list. And then when I do this, I'm going to get a profile back. I'm going to say profiles with images dot add of profile, right? This is the updated profile with the image and the ID specified. I'm going to have to save this to another list, and I'm going to write that list to the file, not the original list, okay? So I'm going to go here and delete all of these files because we don't need this anymore. They have a different UUID, which we are not going to be able to replicate. I'm going to delete all these images, and let's run this one more time, okay? I'm going to set a breakpoint here again so that I can catch it exactly where it hits this point, where I have all the profile images generated. And let's verify if it has both the ID and the profile image field populated. It should have both. All right, we've hit the breakpoint, but this time I'm getting the profile with images saved over here. And this is what is going to get saved into the files. If you examine this, you see here, now this time I have an ID and I have image URL, which is that id.jpg, okay? And let's verify that this thing has been loaded as well. So I'm going to reload from disk, and here are all the profile images that has been generated, which is perfect. All right, so I'm going to save this state into the file, okay? So here I'm converting it to a JSON string, okay? And I'm going to write it to file, and I'm going to write and close, and we are basically done, okay? And this is going to continue the rest of the execution. And if you look at the file here, profiles.json, and of course, format the code, we have everything we need. Now, the last thing that's left to do is to actually insert all these things into the database, okay? Remember, we are creating these files, but we need to also save it to database, okay? So what I'm going to do is over here, the profile creation piece here is where I'm creating the profile. I'm also going to save it to file. This is all the pieces that need to happen if initialize profiles is created, okay? So I'm going to say, where does this go? Create profiles, okay. Now here I'm going to say profile creation service dot save profiles to DB. Okay, I'm going to create one more method, which is going to save the profile to the database. Okay, we need this. Oops. What do I need to do here? I need to read the profiles JSON file, get each profile, and save that to MongoDB. Okay, how do I do that? I first get the profile repository, right? I'm going to go back to this piece where I am actually already saving this to profile repository. I'm going to take this and profile creation service. I'm going to inject this as well over here. I'm not going to auto-wire this. I'm going to use constructor injection. Just like I'm getting the OpenAI chat client, I'm going to get the profile repository as well. And I'm going to say this dot profile repository equals profile repository, standard dependency injection. And now I'm going to go here, the save profiles to DB method. And here what I'm going to do is open the files that were created, okay, which is this part. We can probably move this to to a separate method. I'm probably going to do that as a follow-up, but I'm not going to show you the refactoring right now. Add exception to method signature. No, actually, I can bail over here. If there is a problem with reading this file, I do want to bail. This is when all the profiles have been created. So I'm going to have a try catch, and I'm going to actually throw a runtime exception. Okay, so I'm going to do a JSON, get the existing profiles over here. And now once I have all the profiles, I'm going to say existing profile, or actually there is a profile repository dot save all existing profiles. And of course, I'm going to do a profile repository dot delete all to remove all of the profiles. And I'm going to save all of these existing profiles. Okay. And over here, I'm going to create one profile for myself, which is my own profile. Okay. I'm going to delete this and delete this. And I'm going to delete the conversation stuff as well. This is basically one profile that I need to create for my own ID. Okay, I'm going to get this over here. And go over here to the profile generation piece. And it saves all of the existing profiles. And then I'm going to create my own profile. And I'm probably going to move this to a property file. So it's configurable in the property file. I don't want this to be hidden somewhere over here. But the idea is I get the profiles.json, open it up, create a list, and then remove the existing profiles from the database and save all of the existing profiles into MongoDB. And then I create one profile, which is the users, right? I can have this configured so that it's coming from a properties file. So whoever wants to use this application can enter their details in a property file, and then it'll save that particular information. All right. So this is the profile creation piece and adding it to MongoDB. And with this, we come to the end of this tutorial. This tutorial is a supplement to the main tutorial about building an AI Tinder app. The AI Tinder app tutorial covers building the application and the interactions and the APIs and the front end for the app itself. That tutorial assumed profile generation, and the profiles were already ready and available. This tutorial covered how I created those profiles in the first place. We learned a bunch of stuff. We learned how to use OpenAI to generate these APIs. We learned how to use function calling in OpenAI to be able to get structured data so that we can use it for further purposes. It's not just about showing the bulk of text to the user, right? We want to get data in a structured format so that we can do something with it. We can have it affect subsequent code execution, which is fundamental when you want to integrate AI into your applications. And then we also learn how to use image generation in order to generate profile images for these profiles. So this was an amazing learning experience for me, and I hope it was an amazing learning experience for you as well. Let me know in the comments what aspects of this was not clear for you so that I can make subsequent videos where I kind of dive into those aspects and concepts and explain them in more detail. And also let me know what other videos you would like to see. What other integrations of AI to our familiar way of building applications kind of interests you and you want to dive more into that. I'd love to know so that I can make more content that help you out. So please let me know in the comments. If you've paused the main tutorial to follow along over here and generate the profiles, now is the time to go back to the main tutorial and continue where I take these profiles, create APIs which show random profiles to the user, generate matches, and then build a front end where you can show these profiles and actually build a fully interactive Tinder application. So if you're following along, I'll see you there. If not, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.